Today is September 4th. It's the 248th day of the year, and this is the On This Day podcast. Today is Newspaper Carrier Day in the United States. It's a day to celebrate your paper boy and your paper girl. Observed on this day because on this day in 1833, the first paperboy, 10-year-old Barney Flaherty, is hired to sell papers on a street corner in New York City. So if you're still getting a newspaper, A, you're a rare breed, and B, make sure you tip your paper carrier just a little extra today, in celebration of Newspaper Carrier Day. At 3 p.m. on this day in 1882, the electrical age begins with the flip of a switch. This switch activates the Pearl Street Station, America's first power station, lighting up 1 square mile of Lower Manhattan. This is a clear and powerful demonstration proving that Thomas Alva Edison's electrical lighting system works. 4 years earlier, a group of reporters visit Edison's lab in Menlo Park, New Jersey. He confidently announces that in 6 weeks, illumination by gaslight will be obsolete. Edison also informs them that he will create a new industry of electric power, lighting up America and revolutionizing the world. It takes Edison a little longer than 6 weeks. The next year, Edison creates the first commercially viable electric light bulb. That's great, but rather useless without electricity to power it. So a few months later, he sets up the Edison Electric Illuminating Company of New York, now called Consolidated Edison, or Con Ed. Influenced by the current distribution model for gas and water, Edison envisions a complete system of electrical power generation for both residential and commercial customers. He builds the Pearl Street Station, which will serve as the central source of power. He strategically locates the Pearl Street Station in proximity to a populated area which includes wealthy and influential customers, such as J.P. Morgan, the New York Stock Exchange, and the New York Times. After laying the groundwork for his vision, the time has come for demonstration. A single flip of the switch will make disbelievers see things in a new light. Pun intended. Always entrepreneurial, Edison installs 52 light bulbs in the New York Times building. The day after the lights come on, the paper runs a story about the historic event, describing the experience as, quote, soft, mellow, and graceful to the eye, without a particle of flicker to make the head ache. And goodbye gaslight. Self-educated inventor and businessman Thomas Alva Edison successfully ushers America into the electrical age on this day in 1882. The hype has been building for months. Expectations have been overly inflated. And on this day in 1957, E-Day, the Ford Motor Company unveils its totally different, revolutionary new car, the Edsel. The hook has been carefully baited, but Americans know they've been suckered. The Edsel doesn't deliver on its promises. It's just a sedan, an overpriced, ugly sedan of haphazard quality. Automotive writers trash the car. Its worst feature is the oval-shaped grille. To some, it looks like a toilet seat. To others, it makes the car look like, quote, an Oldsmobile sucking a lemon. And those with a more racy frame of mind, well, you can imagine what it looks like to them. Ford has miscalculated. During the planning stages, America is doing well, the economy is humming along, and people are buying large cars. By the time E-Day rolls around in 1957, a recession is beginning, and no one wants an enormous gas guzzler. Smaller, more efficient cars are what everyone's looking for. The Edsel quickly becomes a symbol of 1950s excess. Ford cuts its losses and puts the Edsel out to pasture after just 22 months. A half-century later, collectors are willing to pay nearly $200,000 for a rare 1960 Edsel convertible. $200,000 for America's famous automotive failure, the Ford Edsel, which makes its debut on this day in 1957. On this day in 2014, American comedy legend Joan Rivers passes away in Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. The Brooklyn-born Joan Rivers comes to prominence as a comedian on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Her numerous appearances there lead to a long-running guest host gig on the show, which leads to her own talk show, and a wide variety of variety shows and red carpet shows and fashion shows and basically any kind of show where Joan can do what she does best. Play the gossipy, acerbic, tough-talking neurotic, pitching one-liners around the refrain of, "Can we talk?" Rivers never stops performing. In 2014, she's hosting an online talk show called In Bed with Joan, which she hosts from her bed in her daughter Melissa's house. At the end of August 2014, complaining of hoarseness in her throat, Rivers agrees to undergo a routine medical procedure and possible biopsy at Yorkville Endoscopy in Manhattan. She does not, however, consent to an additional procedure that her personal ear, nose, and throat doctor will perform. Rivers' doctor does not practice at Yorkville, nor does she have the required license to even work there. Still, the clinic allows her into the operating room to perform an unauthorized procedure. This action, in addition to numerous other mistakes, will lead to an airway obstruction that cuts off Rivers' oxygen supply to her brain. During the procedures, the doctors failed to notice Rivers' deteriorating vital signs for 15 minutes. Possibly the selfie taken with an unconscious Rivers is a distraction for them. With her heart rate slowing to dangerous levels, a code blue is finally called. Yet, strangely, the appropriate emergency treatment is not administered. Rivers goes into cardiac arrest. 911 is called 12 minutes after the code blue. At some moment during all of this chaos, Rivers' personal ENT leaves the room, abandoning Rivers on the table. Joan Rivers spends the next week in a medically induced coma at Mount Sinai Hospital before passing away on this day in 2014. Her death is investigated for 2 months, and in January 2015, a malpractice lawsuit is filed against Yorkville Endoscopy and the doctors involved by Rivers' daughter Melissa. 17 months later, the suit is settled. Melissa Rivers states the lawsuit, quote, ensures that those culpable for her death have accepted responsibility for their actions quickly and without equivocation. She adds that her focus will be to work towards higher safety standards in outpatient surgical clinics so that no one has to suffer through what happened to her mother, Joan Rivers, who passes away on this day in 2014 at the age of 81. There are 118 days left in the year. On This Day is produced by me, Dave Schultz, and today's episode written by Elizabeth Schultz, who happens to be my sister. If you enjoy the show in general or you enjoyed this episode specifically, go ahead and share it with your friends. It's as simple as clicking a button. And if you really like the show, go on over to iTunes and leave us a review. If you, listening right now, if you haven't done that, that's a huge help to us, and it's so easy. And you'll feel really good after you do it too. So if you're still listening, the first time I see a jogger smiling, I'll consider it. Talk to you tomorrow.